Dr. James Mitchell had seen many things during his 15 years working at the Serengeti Wildlife Research Station in Tanzania. As a wildlife biologist, he spent most of his days studying animal behavior and helping with conservation efforts. But nothing could have prepared him for what he was about to witness on that hot Tuesday morning in March. The research station sat on the edge of the vast Serengeti Plains, where thousands of animals roamed freely. James had built strong relationships with the local Maasai communities, who often shared information about unusual animal activities in the area. Their knowledge of the land and its creatures was invaluable to his research. That morning started like any other. James was reviewing his notes from the previous day when his radio crackled to life. Moses, one of the local Maasai guides who worked with the research team, was calling from about 5 miles away. His voice sounded urgent and breathless. "Dr. James, you need to come quickly. Something very strange is happening near the Mara River. A big python has caught something, but there's a lion nearby. The situation is becoming dangerous." James grabbed his emergency kit, camera, and radio, then jumped into his Jeep. The drive across the rough terrain took 20 minutes, but it felt like hours. As he got closer to the location Moses had described, he could hear unusual sounds coming from ahead. There were low growls mixed with the rustling of grass and what sounded like something large moving through the bushes. When James arrived at the scene, he parked his Jeep about 50 yards away and carefully approached on foot. What he saw made his heart race. A massive African rock python, easily 20 feet long and as thick as a telephone pole, had coiled itself around something near the riverbank. The snake's powerful muscles were contracting rhythmically as it squeezed its prey. But this wasn't just any ordinary hunting scene. About 30 feet away, a large male lion was pacing back and forth, clearly agitated. The lion's mane was full and dark, indicating he was in his prime. His golden eyes were fixed on the python, and every few seconds he would let out a low growl that rumbled across the grassland. James quickly set up his camera and began documenting what he was seeing. Through his telephoto lens, he could see that the python had caught a young zebra. The zebra was still alive but clearly in distress, trapped in the snake's deadly embrace. The python was following its natural instinct, slowly squeezing the life out of its prey before swallowing it whole. The lion, however, seemed torn between two conflicting instincts. On one hand, he appeared to want the zebra for himself. Lions were always opportunistic hunters, and a partially weakened zebra would be an easy meal. On the other hand, pythons were not typical prey for lions, and this particular snake was enormous. Even a powerful lion would think twice before attacking such a formidable opponent. As James watched through his camera, the tension in the air was almost tangible. The python seemed aware of the lion's presence but continued its deadly work. Pythons were not venomous, but their strength was incredible. They killed their prey through constriction, slowly cutting off blood flow and breathing until the animal lost consciousness. The young zebra's struggles were becoming weaker, and James knew that without intervention it would be dead within minutes. But intervention in nature was something wildlife researchers were trained to avoid. The natural order was harsh but necessary for the ecosystem's balance. Moses appeared beside James, moving silently as only the Maasai could. He had been tracking the situation from another angle and had seen how it all began. "The zebra came to drink water," Moses whispered. It was alone, separated from its herd. The python was waiting in the reeds by the river. When the zebra bent down to drink, the snake struck like lightning. James nodded, continuing to film. The python's attack had been perfectly executed. African rock pythons were ambush predators, capable of remaining motionless for hours while waiting for the right moment to strike. Once they grabbed their prey, their backward curving teeth made escape nearly impossible. The lion's behavior was becoming more erratic. He would approach the python, then back away when the massive snake shifted position. Lions were intelligent hunters who understood the concept of risk versus reward. This python was large enough to potentially harm even a full-grown lion if it managed to get its coils around the big cat. Suddenly, the situation changed dramatically. The python, perhaps feeling threatened by the lion's presence, began to drag its prey toward the water. If it reached the river, the snake would have a significant advantage. Pythons were excellent swimmers, and they often drowned their prey in shallow water to make the killing process faster and safer. The lion seemed to understand this shift in tactics. His pacing became more aggressive and his growls grew louder. He was running out of time to act if he wanted to claim the zebra for himself. James found himself holding his breath as he watched this extraordinary standoff unfold. In all his years of wildlife research, he had never seen anything quite like this. The interaction between these two apex predators was revealing fascinating insights into animal behavior and decision-making. The zebra's movements were now barely perceptible. The python's constriction was doing its deadly work, and the young animal was losing consciousness. Soon it would be too late for any kind of intervention, natural or otherwise. But as the python continued its slow journey toward the water, dragging its heavy burden across the sandy ground, something unexpected happened. The lion suddenly stopped pacing and stood completely still. His entire body tensed like a coiled spring. James adjusted his camera focus, sensing that something significant was about to happen. The tension that had been building for the past 20 minutes was reaching a breaking point. Whatever happened next would determine the fate of 3 animals and provide James with research material that would be discussed in wildlife circles for years to come. The stage was set for a confrontation that would challenge everything James thought he knew about predator behavior in the wild. The lion's decision came suddenly and without warning. With a powerful roar that echoed across the savannah, he charged directly toward the python. James's heart pounded as he watched through his camera lens, knowing he was about to witness something few humans had ever seen. The massive python sensed the approaching danger and immediately changed its strategy. Instead of continuing toward the water, it released its grip on the zebra slightly and turned to face the attacking lion. The snake's head rose up, forming an S-curve with its neck, ready to strike at anything that came too close. Lions were fast, but pythons had lightning-quick reflexes when defending themselves. As the lion leaped toward the snake, the python's head shot forward like a missile. James captured the exact moment when the snake's jaws, lined with dozens of razor-sharp teeth, snapped at the lion's front paw. The lion was too experienced to be caught so easily. He twisted in midair, avoiding the snake's strike by inches, and landed heavily on the ground beside the python. For a moment, both predators faced each other in a tense standoff, each assessing the other's strength and determining their next move. The zebra, now free from the python's crushing grip, lay gasping on the ground. It was alive but severely weakened from the constriction. Its legs trembled as it tried to stand, but it was too weak to run. The young animal was caught between 2 apex predators, and its fate hung in the balance. James watched in amazement as the lion seemed to make a calculated decision. Instead of attacking the python directly, he moved toward the injured zebra. The lion's strategy was becoming clear. He wanted the prey, not a fight with the dangerous snake. But the python had no intention of giving up its hard-earned meal. With incredible speed for such a large creature, the snake struck again, this time aiming not at the lion but moving to reclaim its grip on the zebra. The python's powerful coils began wrapping around the zebra once more, even as the lion approached. What happened next shocked both James and Moses. The lion, instead of backing away from the dangerous python, actually stepped closer. He positioned himself directly over the zebra, effectively putting himself between the snake and its prey. It was an incredibly bold move that required tremendous courage. The python found itself in an impossible situation. To continue constricting the zebra, it would have to coil around both the zebra and the lion. Even for a snake of this size, attempting to constrict a full-grown male lion was extremely dangerous. Lions had powerful claws and teeth that could cause serious damage to a python's body. James documented every second of this extraordinary interaction. The lion stood his ground, growling low and deep, while the python maintained its grip on the zebra, but seemed uncertain about how to proceed. The snake's tongue flicked in and out rapidly, gathering chemical information about this unusual situation. Minutes passed with neither predator willing to back down. The tension was unbearable. James realized he was witnessing something that challenged conventional understanding of animal behavior. Lions and pythons occupied different ecological niches and rarely came into direct conflict. Yet here they were, locked in a battle of wills over a shared prize. The zebra's breathing was becoming more labored. The python's continued constriction was taking its toll. Even though the snake's attention was divided between its prey and the threatening lion, James found himself emotionally invested in the zebra's survival, even though he knew that death was a natural part of the ecosystem. Suddenly, the dynamics changed again. The lion made a move that surprised everyone watching. Instead of trying to drive the python away, he lowered his head and began to nuzzle the zebra gently. The gesture was almost protective, as if the lion was trying to comfort the distressed animal. This behavior was completely unexpected. Lions were predators, not protectors of other species. Yet here was a male lion showing what appeared to be compassion toward a zebra that was being killed by a python. James had never read about anything like this in the scientific literature. The python seemed as confused by this turn of events as James was. The snake's grip on the zebra loosened slightly, as if it was trying to understand this new development. Pythons were intelligent reptiles capable of adapting their behavior to changing circumstances, but this situation was unprecedented. Moses whispered to James in Swahili, then translated, "In our stories we say that sometimes the spirits of the ancestors speak through the animals. Maybe the lion is being guided by something beyond our understanding." James didn't believe in such spiritual explanations, but he had to admit that what he was seeing defied scientific explanation. Animal behavior was usually predictable, driven by instincts related to survival, reproduction, and territory. This interaction seemed to involve something more complex. The lion continued his protective behavior, even going so far as to lick the zebra's head with his rough tongue. The gesture was gentle, almost tender. Meanwhile, the python's coils continued to loosen around the zebra's body. It was as if the snake was being influenced by the lion's unexpected compassion. James realized that he might be witnessing a form of interspecies empathy that science had not yet fully understood. There had been documented cases of animals helping members of other species, but usually these involved domestic animals or animals in captivity. This was happening in the wild, between natural predators and prey. The zebra's breathing began to improve as the python's grip loosened further. Color started returning to the young animal's eyes, and it attempted to lift its head. The lion responded by stepping back slightly, giving the zebra more room while still maintaining his protective position between the snake and its intended prey. The python made one final attempt to reclaim its meal, lunging toward the zebra with its mouth open wide. But the lion was ready. With a powerful swipe of his paw, he struck the snake's head, not hard enough to seriously injure it, but firmly, enough to send a clear message. The zebra was under his protection. The message was received. The python slowly began to uncoil itself from around the zebra's body. As the massive snake retreated toward the river, the lion remained vigilant, watching every movement to ensure that the python didn't return for another attack. James continued filming, knowing that he had captured footage that would revolutionize understanding of predator behavior and interspecies relationships in the wild. As the python retreated toward the riverbank, James expected the lion to claim his prize. After all, the big cat had successfully driven away the snake and now had an easy meal lying helplessly on the ground. But what happened next would challenge everything James thought he knew about lion behavior. The zebra lay on its side, breathing heavily but alive. Its black and white stripes were covered with dust and saliva from the python's mouth, and there were visible marks where the snake's coils had pressed into its flesh. The young animal's legs were too weak to support its weight, but its eyes were alert and focused on the lion standing nearby. Instead of moving in for the kill, the lion did something extraordinary. He lay down next to the zebra, positioning himself like a protective barrier between the injured animal and the direction where the python had gone. The lion's massive body created a wall of golden fur and muscle that would deter any predator from approaching. James adjusted his camera settings to capture this incredible scene in the late morning light. The contrast between the lion's tawny coat and the zebra's distinctive stripes created a striking image, but it was the behavior he was documenting that truly took his breath away. Moses had seen many things during his years guiding researchers and tourists through the Serengeti, but even he was shaking his head in amazement. "In all my life I have never seen anything like this," he whispered to James. "The lion is acting like a protector, not a hunter. The python had reached the water's edge but hadn't entered the river completely. The massive snake coiled itself in the reedy shallows, its dark brown and yellow patterns providing perfect camouflage among the vegetation. From this position, it could still observe the lion and zebra while remaining ready to disappear into the water if necessary. James noticed that the python's behavior was also unusual. Normally, after losing prey to a competitor, a snake would retreat completely and look for another hunting opportunity, but this python seemed reluctant to abandon the area entirely. It was as if the snake was also puzzled by the lion's protective behavior and wanted to see how the situation would develop. The zebra began to show signs of recovery. With great effort, it managed to lift its head and looked directly at the lion. There was no fear in the zebra's eyes, which was remarkable considering that lions were zebras' primary predators. Instead, there seemed to be a recognition of the protection the lion was providing. James documented every nuance of this interaction. The zebra actually moved closer to the lion, seeking the security of his presence. The lion responded by adjusting his position to better shield the injured animal, never once showing any aggressive behavior toward his natural prey. Hours passed in this unusual arrangement. The sun climbed higher in the sky and the heat began to intensify. James noticed that the lion was deliberately positioning himself to provide shade for the zebra. When the zebra tried to move to a more comfortable position, the lion would shift accordingly, maintaining his protective coverage. During this time, other animals began to take notice of the strange scene. A small herd of Thompson's gazelles approached the waterhole but stopped when they saw the lion. However, instead of fleeing immediately as they normally would, they seemed curious about the unusual pairing. The gazelles maintained a safe distance but continued to observe, as if they too sensed that something extraordinary was happening. A group of vultures circled overhead, having been attracted by the earlier commotion between the lion and python. But as the hours passed without any sign of death or feeding, the scavenger birds gradually lost interest and moved on to search for easier opportunities elsewhere. The python remained in its position by the water, occasionally lifting its head to check on the situation. James realized that the snake was probably becoming hungry again. Pythons could go long periods without eating, but after expending so much energy capturing and beginning to consume the zebra, the snake would need to feed relatively soon. As the afternoon progressed, James witnessed several remarkable interactions between the lion and zebra. When flies began to bother the zebra's wounds, the lion used his tail to brush them away. When the zebra showed signs of thirst, the lion stood up and seemed to encourage the animal to move toward the water. The journey to the water's edge was slow and careful. The zebra's legs were still weak, and it had to stop several times to rest. Throughout this process, the lion remained close, ready to intervene if the python showed any signs of aggression. The snake watched their approach but made no move to attack. At the water's edge, something even more extraordinary occurred. The lion positioned himself between the zebra and the python while the zebra drank. The python was only about 15 feet away, easily close enough to strike, but the lion's presence clearly deterred any aggressive action from the snake. James captured footage of the zebra drinking while under the lion's protection, with the python visible in the background. It was a scene that perfectly encapsulated the surreal nature of what he was witnessing. Three natural enemies coexisting in a space of only a few square yards, with the normal rules of predator and prey completely suspended. After drinking, the zebra showed significant improvement in its condition. The animal was able to stand for longer periods and even took a few tentative steps. The lion seemed pleased with this progress, staying close but allowing the zebra more freedom of movement. As evening approached, James knew he would need to return to the research station soon. But he was reluctant to leave this extraordinary scene. He had been documenting for over 8 hours, and every moment had provided new insights into animal behavior that challenged established scientific understanding. The python finally made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of waiting for another opportunity to attack the zebra, the massive snake began to move away from the waterhole entirely. It slithered into the tall grass, apparently accepting that this particular meal was not meant to be. With the python's departure, James expected the dynamics between the lion and zebra to change. Surely now the lion would revert to his predatory instincts and claim the zebra as his meal. But as the sun began to set over the Serengeti, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and red, The lion continued his protective behavior. The stage was set for an even more remarkable development in this unprecedented story of interspecies compassion. As darkness fell over the Serengeti, James faced a difficult decision. He needed to return to the research station, but leaving this extraordinary scene felt like abandoning the story of a lifetime. After discussing with Moses, they decided that James would return to base to retrieve camping equipment and additional camera gear, while Moses would maintain a safe distance and continue observing. James drove back through the African night, his mind racing with questions about what he had witnessed. During his 15 years of research, he had seen cooperative behavior between animals of the same species, and even occasional instances of different species helping each other. But nothing came close to what he had documented today. At the research station, James quickly gathered his camping gear, extra batteries for his cameras, and his night vision equipment. He also sent preliminary reports to his colleagues at the university, though he knew they would find his initial observations difficult to believe. The footage he had captured would be crucial in validating his claims. When James returned to the site 3 hours later, he was amazed to find that the lion and zebra were still together. Moses appeared from behind a cluster of acacia trees, his white teeth visible in a wide grin despite the darkness. "Dr. James, you will not believe what happened while you were gone," Moses whispered excitedly. The zebra tried to walk away twice, but the lion followed and guided it back to safety. And when a hyena came to investigate, the lion chased it away without even looking at the zebra as potential prey. James set up his night vision equipment and began documenting the nocturnal continuation of this remarkable relationship. Through the green-tinted view of his night vision scope, he could see the lion and zebra resting close together. The lion was positioned so that he could quickly respond to any threats, while the zebra lay peacefully beside him. The African night was full of sounds, the distant laughter of hyenas, the haunting call of a barn owl, and the rustle of small animals moving through the grass. But in the small circle where the lion and zebra rested, there was an unusual peace. James had never seen a zebra so calm in the presence of a lion, and he had certainly never seen a lion show such protective behavior toward natural prey. Around midnight, their peaceful scene was interrupted by the arrival of a pack of spotted hyenas. These scavengers had excellent hearing and smell, and they had likely been drawn by the scent of the zebra's earlier distress. Hyenas were known for their opportunistic nature and their willingness to steal kills from other predators. The lead hyena approached cautiously, its distinctive sloped back and powerful jaws clearly visible in James's night vision equipment. Hyenas were formidable predators in their own right, and a pack of them could challenge even a male lion under the right circumstances. The lion's response was immediate and decisive. He rose to his feet with a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground. But instead of moving away from the zebra to confront the hyenas, he positioned himself directly over the injured animal. His message was clear. Anyone wanting to reach the zebra would have to go through him first. The lead hyena paused, clearly confused by this unexpected scenario. Hyenas were intelligent animals with complex social structures, and they understood lion behavior well. But this lion was acting completely contrary to normal patterns. Why would a lion protect a zebra, instead of either eating it or abandoning it to scavengers? More hyenas arrived, and soon there were 6 of them circling at a respectful distance. They communicated with each other through their characteristic whooping calls, likely trying to coordinate a strategy for this unusual situation. James captured their confusion and hesitation on camera, noting how their normal scavenging behavior was disrupted by the lion's protective stance. The standoff continued for nearly an hour. The hyenas would approach, test the lion's resolve, and then retreat when he showed clear signs of aggression. Throughout this entire confrontation, the zebra remained calm, seeming to understand that it was under the lion's protection. Eventually, the hyenas gave up and moved on to search for easier opportunities. Their departure marked another victory for the unlikely alliance between the lion and zebra. James documented the moment when the lion settled back down beside the zebra, his protective duty fulfilled once again. As the night progressed, James witnessed several more touching interactions between the two animals. When the zebra shivered in the cool night air, the lion moved closer, sharing his body heat. When distant sounds of predators caused the zebra to become nervous, the lion would place his massive paw gently on the zebra's back, offering reassurance. Perhaps most remarkably, James observed the lion grooming the zebra's wounds. Using his rough tongue, the lion carefully cleaned the areas where the python's coils had pressed into the zebra's flesh. This grooming behavior was typically seen between lions and their cubs or between mating pairs. To see it directed toward a different species was unprecedented. Dawn brought new challenges and opportunities. As the sun rose over the Serengeti, painting the landscape in golden hues, the zebra showed significant improvement in its condition. The animal was able to stand without assistance and take several steps. The lion watched these efforts with what could only be described as pride and satisfaction. James had been awake for over 24 hours, but adrenaline and scientific curiosity kept him alert. He knew he was documenting behavior that would be studied and discussed for decades to come. Every moment brought new insights into the capacity for empathy and cooperation between species that had evolved as natural enemies. The zebra's recovery seemed to present the lion with a dilemma. As the zebra became stronger and more mobile, it naturally began to show interest in rejoining its herd. Zebras were social animals that depended on group protection for survival. A lone zebra, even a healthy one, was vulnerable to predation, but the zebra's herd was nowhere to be seen. They had likely moved on during the previous day's drama, continuing their migration to better grazing areas. This left the recovering zebra in a dangerous position, strong enough to survive but without the protection of its group. The lion seemed to understand this dilemma. Instead of allowing the zebra to wander off alone, he began to guide the animal in a specific direction. James followed at a distance, amazed to see the lion leading the zebra across the savanna, like a protective shepherd. Their destination became clear after several hours of travel. The lion was leading the zebra toward a large herd of zebras that was grazing about 5 miles from the original waterhole. James realized that the lion must have been aware of this herd's location and was deliberately reuniting the young zebra with its own kind. The final chapter of this extraordinary story was about to unfold, and James knew it would provide the most remarkable conclusion to an already incredible tale of interspecies compassion and protection. The journey across the Serengeti took most of the morning, with the lion maintaining a steady pace that the recovering zebra could manage. James followed in his jeep, documenting every step of this unprecedented escort mission. The sight of a lion voluntarily leading a zebra to safety went against every established principle of predator-prey relationships. As they approached the zebra herd, James could see the animals in the distance through his telephoto lens. The herd was substantial, consisting of at least 40 adult zebras and several foals. They were grazing peacefully on the fresh grass that had grown following recent rains, unaware of the extraordinary drama that was approaching them. The lion seemed to understand that his presence would cause panic among the zebra herd. About half a mile from the group, he stopped and looked directly at the young zebra he had been protecting. What happened next was so remarkable that James had to check his camera settings to ensure he was capturing everything clearly. The lion began what could only be described as a farewell ritual. He gently nuzzled the zebra's neck, the same gesture he had used to comfort the animal during its recovery. Then he stepped back and gave what appeared to be an encouraging nudge toward the distant herd. The message was clear. It was time for the zebra to rejoin its own kind. The young zebra seemed reluctant to leave its protector. It took a few steps toward the herd, then turned back to look at the lion. This behavior continued several times, with the zebra appearing torn between its natural instinct to rejoin its species and its gratitude toward the lion who had saved its life. James captured this emotional farewell through his camera lens, noting the apparent bond that had formed between these two unlikely companions. The zebra's behavior suggested a level of understanding and emotional connection that challenged scientific assumptions about animal consciousness and interspecies relationships. Finally, with what seemed like great reluctance, the zebra began walking steadily toward its herd. The lion watched from his position, making no attempt to follow. As the zebra moved away, it stopped several times to look back, as if ensuring that its protector was still watching over its journey to safety. The zebra herd's reaction to the approaching animal was initially cautious. The lead stallion positioned himself between the newcomer and the rest of the herd, a typical protective response to any potential threat. But as the young zebra got closer, recognition set in. James could see through his binoculars that several zebras from the herd began moving toward the approaching animal, with clear signs of excitement and relief. The reunion was emotional, even by animal standards. The young zebra was surrounded by what appeared to be family members, likely its mother, siblings, and other relatives. There was much nuzzling, touching, and vocal communication as the herd welcomed back their lost member. James documented this joyful reunion, noting how the zebras seemed to be examining the young animal for injuries and reassuring themselves of its well-being. Throughout this entire reunion process, the lion remained in his position half a mile away, watching the proceedings with what could only be described as satisfaction. James observed the big cat through his telephoto lens, noting that the lion showed no signs of hunting behavior despite being so close to a large herd of his natural prey. When the zebra herd eventually moved on, continuing their migration across the vast grasslands, the young zebra went with them. But James noticed something remarkable. Before disappearing over a distant ridge, the young zebra separated, briefly from the herd, and turned back one final time, toward where the lion was waiting. The lion responded to this final acknowledgement with a behavior that James had never seen in his years of research. The big cat stood up on his hind legs briefly, a gesture that seemed almost like a wave goodbye. Then he turned and began walking in the opposite direction, his mission of protection and rescue complete. James sat in his jeep for a long time after both animals had disappeared from view, trying to process what he had witnessed over the past 36 hours. As a scientist, he knew that his observations would be met with skepticism in academic circles. The behavior he had documented challenged fundamental assumptions about animal cognition, empathy, and the rigid boundaries between predator and prey relationships. Moses approached the jeep, his weathered face showing a mixture of amazement and deep satisfaction. "Dr. James," he said quietly, "in my culture, we believe that sometimes the spirits of our ancestors work through the animals to teach us important lessons. Today, I think we learned something very important about compassion and protection." James nodded, though his scientific training made him reluctant to accept spiritual explanations for natural phenomena. However, he couldn't deny that what he had witnessed transcended normal animal behavior patterns. The lion had shown qualities: empathy, sacrifice, protective instincts toward another species, that suggested a level of emotional sophistication that science was only beginning to understand. As they prepared to leave the site, James took one final look around the area where this extraordinary drama had unfolded. The python was long gone, probably hunting in a different part of the river system. The zebra was safely reunited with its herd, bearing scars from its ordeal but alive and healthy. And the lion had returned to his solitary existence, carrying with him the knowledge that he had performed an act of remarkable compassion. James spent the drive back to the research station thinking about how he would present his findings to the scientific community. He had hours of high-definition video footage, thousands of still photographs, and detailed written observations. More importantly, he had Moses as a witness to corroborate his account. But beyond the scientific implications, James knew he had witnessed something that touched the very essence of what it meant to show compassion across species boundaries. The lion's behavior suggested that the capacity for empathy and protective care might be more widespread in the animal kingdom than previously believed. As they reached the research station, James realized that this experience would change not only his understanding of animal behavior, but his entire perspective on the interconnectedness of life in the wild. The boundaries between predator and prey, between competitor and protector, had proven to be far more fluid than anyone had imagined. The story was far from over, though. James knew that the real work was just beginning, analyzing the footage, consulting with colleagues, and preparing to share this remarkable tale with the world. Back at the Serengeti Wildlife Research Station, James immediately began the painstaking process of reviewing and cataloging his footage. For 3 days, he barely slept, going through every frame of video and every photograph to ensure he had documented the complete sequence of events. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. He had captured one of the most remarkable displays of interspecies compassion ever recorded. His first step was to contact Dr. Sarah Chen, his former mentor at Cambridge University, and one of the world's leading experts in animal behavior. When James called her via satellite phone and described what he had witnessed, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "James, are you absolutely certain about what you're telling me?" Dr. Chen finally asked. What you're describing goes against everything we know about lion behavior. Are you sure this wasn't some kind of aberrant behavior caused by illness or injury? James had anticipated this reaction. He spent the next hour describing every detail of his observations, from the initial confrontation between the lion and python to the final farewell between the lion and zebra. He also mentioned Moses as a corroborating witness and emphasized the extensive video documentation he had gathered. Dr. Chen agreed to review the preliminary footage that James could transmit via satellite internet, though the connection in remote Tanzania was slow and unreliable. Even the low-resolution preview clips he managed to send were enough to convince her that something extraordinary had indeed occurred. Within days, news of James's discovery began to spread through the international wildlife research community. His footage was shared with leading animal behaviorists, evolutionary biologists, and experts in cognitive ethology, the study of animal intelligence and emotion. The response was unprecedented. Dr. Marcus Hoffman from the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology called James's documentation a paradigm-shifting observation that challenges our fundamental understanding of empathy in non-human animals. Dr. Elena Rodriguez from the Jane Goodall Institute described it as evidence that emotional complexity in large mammals may be far greater than we previously imagined. However, not all responses were positive. Some established researchers questioned whether James had misinterpreted normal territorial behavior or whether the lion might have been suffering from a neurological condition that affected its hunting instincts. Dr. Richard Thornfield from Oxford University suggested that the lion might have been protecting a potential future meal rather than showing genuine compassion. These criticisms only motivated James to analyze his data more thoroughly. He collaborated with computer specialists to enhance his video footage and worked with acoustic experts to analyze the vocalizations recorded during the encounter. Every piece of evidence supported his original observations. 3 months after the initial incident, James received unexpected validation from an entirely different source. A Maasai elder named Samuel Ultinkoi contacted the research station through Moses, claiming that his grandfather had witnessed a similar event nearly 60 years earlier. According to the elder's account, his grandfather had seen a lion protect a wounded buffalo calf from a pack of wild dogs, eventually leading the calf back to its herd. The story had been passed down through oral tradition, but had never been taken seriously by outsiders. James's documentation suddenly gave credibility to this decades-old tale. The international media eventually picked up the story, and James found himself fielding calls from documentarians, journalists, and television producers from around the world. National Geographic offered to fund a long-term study to search for similar behavior patterns among African predators. The BBC commissioned a special documentary about the incident, with James serving as the primary consultant. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from an unexpected source. The Maasai communities around the Serengeti began referring to the lion in James's footage as Simba wa Huruma, the lion of compassion. Word spread that this particular lion had been spotted several more times in the area, always displaying unusually peaceful behavior around other animals. Local guides reported that the same lion had been seen allowing smaller animals to drink at water holes without showing any hunting behavior. On one occasion, tourists witnessed him sleeping peacefully while a group of warthogs foraged nearby, behavior that would normally be impossible, given the lion's predatory instincts. James returned to the site of the original encounter exactly 1 year later, hoping to learn more about this remarkable lion's ongoing behavior. What he discovered exceeded even his wildest expectations. Moses led him to a water hole about 10 miles from the original location, where they found the lion resting under an acacia tree. But the lion was not alone. Nearby, a small herd of zebras was grazing peacefully, showing no fear of the big cat's presence. Even more remarkably, James observed the lion actively warning the zebras when a group of spotted hyenas approached the area. The lion's roar sent the hyenas retreating, and the zebras seemed to understand that they were under his protection. James spent 2 weeks documenting this ongoing relationship between the lion and various prey animals in the area. His footage showed the lion consistently choosing protection over predation, sharing territory with animals that should have been his natural food source. The scientific papers resulting from James's research were published in the most prestigious journals in the field. His work sparked a new branch of study focused on empathy and emotional intelligence in large predators. Universities around the world began funding similar research projects, searching for other examples of cross-species compassion in the wild. 5 years after the original incident, James established the Serengeti Compassion Research Center, dedicated to studying extraordinary examples of animal empathy and cooperation. The center attracted researchers from around the globe and became a model for how traditional scientific methods could be combined with indigenous knowledge to better understand animal behavior. Moses became the center's head guide and cultural liaison, ensuring that Maasai wisdom and traditions were incorporated into the research process. His grandfather's stories, once dismissed as folklore, were now recognized as valuable historical data points in the study of animal behavior. The lion that started it all continued to be a subject of study until he passed away peacefully at an estimated age of 15, which was quite old for a wild lion. Even in his final years, he maintained his unusual protective behavior toward other species. When he died, the Maasai conducted a traditional ceremony honoring him as a teacher who had shown humans the true meaning of compassion. James's career was forever changed by those 36 hours beside the Mara River. His work challenged the scientific community to reconsider fundamental assumptions about animal consciousness, emotion, and the capacity for empathy across species boundaries. The footage he captured became one of the most studied pieces of wildlife documentation in history. But beyond the academic recognition and scientific breakthroughs, James knew that he had witnessed something profoundly important about the nature of life itself. The lion of compassion had demonstrated that the boundaries between predator and prey, between enemy and protector, were not as fixed as humans had believed. In his final report on the incident, James wrote, "What we witnessed in the Serengeti challenges us to reconsider not only how we understand animal behavior, but how we view our own capacity for compassion across the boundaries that seem to divide us. If a lion can show mercy to a zebra, perhaps there is hope for greater understanding and cooperation in our own world." The story of the python, the lion, and the zebra became more than just a remarkable wildlife encounter. It became a symbol of hope, demonstrating that even in nature's most competitive environments, compassion could triumph over conflict, and protection could overcome predation. The lesson learned beside the Mara River continues to inspire researchers, conservationists, and anyone who believes in the power of empathy to transform the world.